At 6:47 a.m. on August 14, 1943, Marine Corporal James "Jimmy" Castellano crouched in a muddy foxhole on Vella La Vella Island, surrounded by the bodies of 3 Marines who'd been alive 12 hours earlier. Each had a single bullet hole in the head. No muzzle flash, no sound, just death arriving from somewhere in the jungle canopy. In the next 6 weeks, Castellano would eliminate 22 Japanese snipers, using a weapon the Marine Corps never issued him, a technique his commanding officer explicitly forbade, and a level of patience that would make him a ghost story whispered across the South Pacific. This is the story of how a Brooklyn street kid with a mail-order rifle changed jungle warfare forever. The Marine Corps called men like Castellano suicidal because they volunteered for the most dangerous job in the Pacific Theater, counter-sniper operations. Japanese snipers killed with surgical precision, targeting officers, radio men, and medics from distances that made retaliation impossible. By August 1943, Marine casualties from sniper fire had reached 34% in certain jungle operations. Standard protocol demanded artillery strikes or flamethrowers to clear suspected sniper positions. Both solutions destroyed valuable intelligence, revealed American positions, and often accomplished nothing because the sniper had already displaced. Castellano knew this better than most. He'd watched it happen. James Castellano grew up in Red Hook, Brooklyn, where the docks met the tenements, and every block had its own hierarchy of violence. His father worked the shipping yards, loading cargo 16 hours a day for wages that barely covered rent. Jimmy learned to fight in the streets, not with boxing gloves in a gym, but with broken bottles and chain-link fences as backdrops. He was small, wiry, with hands that moved faster than his mouth. More importantly, he learned to watch, to read patterns, to predict where trouble would come from before it arrived. At 14, he worked weekends at Rossi's Auto Repair, disassembling engines and learning how mechanical systems failed. At 16, he discovered something that separated him from every other kid in Red Hook. He could see things at distance that others couldn't. A pigeon landing 3 blocks away, a face in a 4th-floor window. His friends called it creepy. Jimmy called it useful. In 1941, he enlisted before Pearl Harbor, driven less by patriotism than by the certainty that the shipping yards would eventually cripple him like they'd crippled his father. The Marine Corps seemed like an escape route. They issued him an M1 Garand, taught him to shoot at stationary targets 300 yards away, and shipped him to Guadalcanal in January 1943. The jungle taught him that target practice meant nothing. Marine Sergeant Robert McKenna died on February 3, 1943, at 1:15 p.m., shot through the left eye while directing mortar fire against a Japanese machine gun nest. The sniper fired from somewhere in the banyan trees 400 yards north. Artillery plastered the area for 20 minutes. They found no body, no blood, no spent cartridge. McKenna had been Castellano's squad leader, a Oklahoma farm kid who'd taught him how to read the jungle, how to distinguish bird calls from Japanese signals, how to move through vegetation without disturbing the visual pattern. They'd shared cigarettes and talked about opening a garage together in Tulsa after the war. Castellano helped carry McKenna's body back to the aid station. Corporal Thomas Chen died on February 19th, shot through the throat at 7:20 a.m. while distributing ammunition. Again, a single shot from unknown distance. Again, artillery accomplished nothing. Chen had grown up in San Francisco's Chinatown, spoke 3 languages, and could fix any radio the Marines possessed. He'd jury-rigged Castellanos' walkie-talkie when it shorted out in the rain, spending 4 hours in a monsoon to restore communication. Private First Class Anthony Russo died on March 8th during a patrol, killed by a bullet that struck him in the temple as he knelt to refill his canteen. Russo was 19, from South Philly, and had promised his mother he'd take care of himself. He collected her letters in a waterproof pouch and read them every night. Castellano had been walking 6 feet behind him when it happened. He heard the impact before he heard the shot. A wet crack like a branch breaking. Russo's body slumped sideways into the stream, turning the water pink. The sniper vanished into the jungle. By June 1943, Castellano had watched 11 men die this way. The pattern became clear. Japanese snipers operated from extreme range, often 600 to 800 yards, using specialized rifles with telescopic sights. They positioned themselves in canopy, waited for targets of opportunity, fired once, then relocated. American doctrine couldn't touch them. The M1 Garand had effective range of 500 yards with iron sights. Even the Springfield 1903 sniper rifles the Marines possessed maxed out around 600 yards with any accuracy. The Japanese had better equipment and better training. Marines died because the institution refused to adapt. Castellano brought this to Lieutenant Harrison's attention on June 12th, after another sniper killed a radio man during a river crossing. Harrison was West Point, by the book, convinced that Marine Corps doctrine represented the accumulated wisdom of military science. He listened to Castellano's assessment with the expression of a man tolerating a child's tantrum. The M1903 is within specification for counter-sniper operations, Corporal. Sir, specification doesn't mean shit when the target's 200 yards outside our effective range. Mind your language, Corporal. We use suppressive fire and maneuver, not individual heroics. That's doctrine. Doctrine's getting Marines killed, sir. Harrison's jaw tightened. You're dismissed, Corporal. If I hear you undermining morale again, you'll face disciplinary action. Castellano walked away, knowing 2 things. Lieutenant Harrison would never change his mind, and more Marines would die unless someone did something the Marine Corps wouldn't approve. The something arrived in a package from Brooklyn on July 2nd, 1943. Castellano's younger brother Vincent worked at a sporting goods store in Manhattan and knew about Jimmy's frustration. In May, Jimmy had written him asking about civilian hunting rifles with long-range capability. Vincent sent back a Winchester Model 70, pre-war production, chambered in .30 Euro 6 Springfield with a Lyman 4X scope. He'd purchased it from an estate sale, paid $87.50, and shipped it through civilian postal channels before military censors could intercept it. The package arrived labeled machine parts. Castellano opened it in his tent at 11:30 p.m., alone, knowing that possession of unauthorized weapons violated regulations. The rifle weighed 8.8 pounds, heavier than the M1 Garand, with a 5-round internal magazine and a bolt-action mechanism that required manual cycling. The scope added precision, but meant slower follow-up shots. The Marine Corps would never issue such a weapon because it contradicted their philosophy of overwhelming firepower through semi-automatic rifles. Castellano didn't care about philosophy. He cared about effective range. The Winchester Model 70 could reach out to 800 yards with proper ammunition and shooter skill. Combined with the scope, it gave him parity with Japanese sniper rifles. Maybe better, because Winchester's pre-war quality control exceeded anything Japan mass-produced for military use. But owning the rifle solved nothing if he couldn't use it. Harrison would confiscate it immediately if discovered. Court-martial would follow, possibly dishonorable discharge, definitely prison time at Leavenworth. Using unauthorized weapons in combat violated the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Even if the rifle saved lives, the institution would punish him for breaking rules. Castellano spent 3 nights weighing the decision. On July 5th, another Marine died. Private Daniel O'Connor, shot through the chest while smoking a cigarette during a rest break. 18 years old, from Boston, wanted to be a teacher. The sniper had fired from at least 700 yards, evident from the bullet's trajectory and the delayed sound of the shot. O'Connor bled out in Castellano's arms, trying to apologize for getting blood on Castellano's uniform. That night, Castellano made his decision. At 2:15 a.m. on July 6th, he sat in his tent with the Winchester disassembled in front of him. The smell of gun oil mixed with jungle humidity, creating a sharp chemical tang that burned his sinuses. He'd acquired ammunition through trading cigarettes with a Navy supply clerk, 50 rounds of .30-06 M2 ball ammunition, identical to what the M1 Garand fired, but loaded to slightly higher pressures, for better long-range performance. The scope needed adjustment. He'd test-fired it exactly once, at dawn 2 days earlier, sneaking away from camp to a clearing 200 yards from the perimeter. 3 shots at a palm tree. The scope had held 0, but he needed to confirm accuracy at distance before relying on it in combat. He cleaned the barrel with meticulous care, running patches through until they emerged white instead of gray. The bolt mechanism slid smooth, each component machined to tolerances that made the rifle feel like a precision instrument rather than a weapon. He mounted the scope, torqued the rings to proper tension, using a multi-tool he'd borrowed from Chen before Chen died. The weapon was ready. Castellano wasn't certain he was. Using this rifle meant operating alone, stalking Japanese snipers through territory where they had every advantage. It meant violating direct orders. It meant risking court-martial. But it also meant Marines might stop dying from threats they couldn't counter. He reassembled the Winchester, loaded 5 rounds into the magazine, chambered 1, and set the safety. Then he wrapped it in a poncho and hid it beneath his cot. Tomorrow, he'd carry it into the jungle and find out if a Brooklyn Street kid with a mail-order rifle could kill professionally trained Japanese snipers. He didn't sleep that night. The mission came 2 days later. A standard patrol to secure a trail junction 3 miles northwest of the main Marine position. 12 men, Castellano included, led by Sergeant Paul Whitmore, a Georgia farmer who'd survived Guadalcanal and knew better than to trust quiet jungles. Castellano carried the Winchester wrapped in burlap, the M1 Garand slung across his back as camouflage. If questioned, he'd claim the Winchester was salvaged from a wrecked transport. Nobody questioned it. Most Marines carried personal knives, extra grenades, souvenirs. A wrapped rifle didn't warrant attention. They moved out at 6:00 a.m., single file, 20-foot intervals between men. The jungle canopy filtered sunlight into green twilight, thick vegetation limiting visibility to 30 yards in most directions. Bird calls echoed from multiple directions, some genuine, some Japanese scouts using bamboo whistles. Castellano walked fourth in line, scanning the canopy automatically, looking for irregularities in branch patterns or unnatural stillness among the leaves. At 8:47 a.m., the patrol stopped for water break at a creek crossing. Whitmore positioned security, 2 men watching their back trail, 2 scanning forward, the rest refilling canteens. Castellano moved 15 yards east, found a fallen log, and sat with the Winchester unwrapped across his knees, pretending to clean it. The shot came at 8:53 a.m. Marine Private Lewis Grant stood from the creek, water dripping from his canteen, when the bullet struck him in the upper chest, just below the collarbone. The impact spun him sideways into the water with a splash that sent birds exploding from nearby trees. Castellano heard the shot 1.2 seconds later, a sharp crack from the northeast. Distance impossible to judge, but definitely long range. Grant floated face down in the creek, already dead. The patrol scattered, finding cover behind trees and rocks, returning fire in the general direction of the shot with M1 Garands set to semi-automatic. 30 rounds chewed through vegetation 400 yards away, accomplishing nothing. Castellano didn't fire. He scanned the canopy northeast, looking for muzzle flash, movement, anything that would reveal position. Japanese snipers typically fired from 15 to 30 feet above ground, using branches as platforms and foliage as concealment. They built hides patiently, over days, blending natural materials until their position became invisible. The jungle revealed nothing. Whitmore's voice cut through the chaos. "Covering fire! Retrieve Grant! Move!" 2 Marines sprinted to the creek, while others maintained suppressive fire. Castellano stayed motionless, watching. The sniper had fired once and gone silent. Standard doctrine. Either he'd relocated already, or he was waiting for another target of opportunity. Firing again would reveal his position, but if the Marines followed protocol and called artillery, he'd vanish before the first shells arrived. Castellano made a decision that violated every tactical principle the Marine Corps had taught him. He stood, walked 20 yards into the jungle, perpendicular to the patrol's position, and found a spot with clear sight lines northeast. Then he sat, propped the Winchester against a tree, and waited. The patrol would withdraw, call artillery, plaster the area. The sniper knew this. Standard response, but the sniper also knew that artillery took 20 minutes minimum to arrive, and in that window he could displace safely, unless someone waited for him to move. Castellano settled into position, scope focused on the canopy 600 yards out, where vegetation thinned slightly near a cluster of banyan trees. He controlled his breathing, slowed his heart rate, entered the mental state he'd discovered as a teenager, watching Red Hook streets for threats. Everything narrowed to visual input and trigger control. The patrol withdrew at 9:08 a.m., carrying Grant's body, firing sporadically to cover their movement. Radio chatter crackled, requesting artillery support. The jungle grew quiet. Birds returned to their calls. Humidity pressed down like a wet blanket, sweat soaking Castellano's uniform within minutes. He didn't move. At 9:19 a.m., something shifted in the canopy, 620 yards northeast. Not wind. The movement had purpose. A branch settling after weight transferred from it. Castellano adjusted the scope, focused on the area. A second movement confirmed it. Someone climbing down from an elevated position, slow and careful, rifle slung across their back. The Japanese sniper descended branch by branch, confident that American forces had withdrawn, and artillery would strike his previous position, not his current location. He wore a ghillie suit constructed from local vegetation, face painted in irregular patterns that broke up human features. His rifle was an Arisaka Type 97 sniper variant with a 4X scope, effective to 700 yards in skilled hands. Castellano's crosshairs settled on the man's center mass. Range, 620 yards. Wind, minimal. Left to right, maybe 3 miles. Elevation, slight upward angle compensated by the scope's adjustment. The sniper paused 20 feet above ground, one hand on a branch, scanning the jungle below before continuing his descent. Castellano exhaled halfway, held it, and squeezed the trigger. The Winchester recoiled against his shoulder with a sharp crack that echoed through the jungle. The bullet crossed 620 yards in 0.7 seconds, struck the sniper in the chest, and punched through both lungs before exiting below the right shoulder blade. The man's grip failed. He fell backward, crashed through 2 layers of branches, and hit the ground with an impact Castellano heard from 600 yards away. Castellano worked the bolt, ejected the spent cartridge, chambered a fresh round, and kept the scope trained on the position. The body didn't move. No backup sniper fired from a secondary position. The jungle returned to silence, broken only by bird calls and distant artillery impacts 3 miles west, plastering empty canopy where the sniper had been 10 minutes earlier. Castellano waited another 15 minutes, then withdrew, wrapping the Winchester in burlap and rejoining the patrol 2 miles south. Nobody asked where he'd been. In combat, temporary separation happened. Whitmore noted his return with a nod. Nothing more. That night, Castellano said nothing about the kill. He cleaned the Winchester in his tent, recorded the details in a notebook he kept hidden, and tried to process what he'd learned. Patience mattered more than firepower, and the Marine Corps would never officially approve what he'd just done. 3 days later, another Marine patrol reported finding a dead Japanese sniper in the jungle, identified by the Arisaka rifle and ghillie suit. Intelligence officers examined the body, noted the bullet wound, filed a report attributing the death to unknown friendly fire, possibly artillery fragmentation. The report sat on desks for 2 weeks before being archived. Nobody connected it to Castellano. He killed the second sniper on July 14th during a reconnaissance mission near a river valley the Marines needed to cross. The sniper had positioned himself in a coconut palm 780 yards from the planned crossing point, elevated 40 feet, with perfect fields of fire across the approach routes. Marine scouts spotted him using binoculars, but couldn't engage effectively at that range. Castellano volunteered to secure the northern approach, which meant hiking a mile through jungle to establish a position with clear sightline to the palm tree. It took him 2 hours. He fired once. The sniper fell. Castellano returned to the patrol, and the crossing proceeded without casualties. Word began to spread. Marine Sergeant Mike Torres witnessed the third kill on July 22nd, watching through binoculars as Castellano engaged a sniper who'd killed 2 Marines earlier that morning. Torres saw the shot, saw the sniper fall from his position 690 yards away, and approached Castellano afterward as they regrouped. "What the hell are you carrying?" Castellano considered lying, decided against it. Winchester Model 70 came from Brooklyn. The Corps issued that. No. Torres studied him for a long moment. That thing saved my radio man's life. You need ammunition? Always. I'll see what I can do. By evening, Torres had spread the word to 3 other sergeants. By the next morning, Castellano had 60 additional rounds of .30-06 ammunition, traded from supply personnel who understood that regulations mattered less than results. By the end of the week, 5 different squad leaders had quietly asked if Castellano could accompany their patrols when operating in areas with known sniper activity. No official documentation recorded these arrangements. No engineering approval existed for the Winchester. No training manual covered the tactics Castellano developed. Just whispered conversations between NCOs who'd watched too many Marines die from threats they couldn't counter. Lieutenant Harrison noticed something had changed when Marine casualties from sniper fire dropped from 6 in June to 1 in the last week of July. He reviewed patrol reports, found nothing unusual, and attributed the improvement to enhanced vigilance and proper application of suppressive fire doctrine. He never investigated further. Japanese forces noticed too, though their understanding came slower. On August 3rd, a veteran sniper named Corporal Takeshi Hayashi survived an encounter with what he described in his diary as an American marksman with exceptional range and patience, unlike standard Marines who fire reflexively and reveal positions. Hayashi had been displacing from a previous hide when a bullet struck a tree 6 inches from his head, fired from an estimated 750 yards. He abandoned the area immediately and reported the incident to his commanding officer. Japanese intelligence officers collected similar reports throughout August. American marksmanship had improved dramatically in specific sectors, suggesting either specialized units had arrived or individual Marines had acquired better equipment. Analysis of recovered American positions found no evidence of new rifle models, no specialized ammunition, nothing to explain the change. They didn't know about Castellano because he left no evidence. He collected his brass casings, varied his positions, never used the same hide twice, and operated alone or with minimal support. To Japanese observers, the threat seemed distributed across multiple locations and times, not concentrated in a single individual. This made it more terrifying. If Americans had suddenly developed better training or equipment across the board, Japanese sniper doctrine would need fundamental revision. Radio intercepts in late August included references to avoiding areas where the ghost shoots, Japanese slang for locations where their snipers disappeared without explanation. Certain ridge lines, certain jungle approaches, certain river crossings became zones Japanese snipers refused to enter without heavy infantry support. Castellano operated in exactly those zones. By September 1st, 1943, Castellano had eliminated 22 Japanese snipers, a figure documented in his personal notebook, but never officially recorded in Marine Corps reports. Each kill was annotated with date, location, range, and conditions. The longest shot, 847 yards on August 28th, engaging a sniper who'd killed a Navy corpsman. The shortest, 412 yards on August 9th, a hasty engagement during a firefight where the sniper exposed himself repositioning. Marine casualties from sniper fire in Castellano's operational area fell by 67% between June and September. Conservative estimates credit his actions with saving between 40 and 60 Marine lives, possibly more when accounting for indirect effects, like improved morale and enemy caution. The official Marine Corps response came on September 8th, when a logistics officer conducting equipment inventory discovered Castellano's Winchester during a routine inspection. The officer filed a report. The report reached Harrison's desk. Harrison ordered Castellano to report immediately. The meeting lasted 4 minutes. Harrison sat behind a field desk. The Winchester laid across it like evidence at a trial. "This weapon is unauthorized, Corporal. You're aware of regulations regarding personal equipment in combat zones. Yes, sir. You're also aware this constitutes a violation of the UCMJ, potentially subject to court-martial. Yes, sir. Harrison leaned back, studying Castellano with an expression that mixed frustration with something approaching respect. How many? Sir, how many snipers have you killed with this rifle? Castellano considered lying, decided the truth mattered more. 22 confirmed, sir. 3 probables I couldn't verify. Harrison absorbed this in silence. Finally, 22. Yes, sir. And you've been operating without authorization for 3 months. Yes, sir. Harrison picked up the Winchester, examined the scope, worked the bolt action. This is superior to the M1903 in several respects. Scope clarity, bolt smoothness, trigger pull weight. He set it down. It's also completely outside doctrine, unregulated, and makes you personally liable for violations that should result in dishonorable discharge. Castellano said nothing. There was nothing to say. Harrison stood, walked to the tent entrance, looked out at the jungle. Marine casualties from sniper fire have decreased significantly in your sector. Division Intelligence noticed. They attributed it to improved coordination and training. He turned back. They're wrong, aren't they, Corporal? Partially wrong, sir. Coordination helps. But the Winchester reaches. Targets the M1903 can't touch. And you decided to violate regulations because you believed the Marine Corps was wrong. I decided to violate regulations because Marines were dying, sir, and nobody with authority was doing anything to stop it. Harrison's jaw tightened. For a moment, Castellano thought court-martial was inevitable. Then Harrison walked back to the desk, picked up the Winchester, and handed it to Castellano. You will document your tactics in a written report, including range estimation techniques, scope adjustment procedures, and positioning methodology. You will submit this report to me within 48 hours. You will train 2 Marines of my selection in counter-sniper operations, using techniques you've developed, and you will never, under any circumstances, discuss the unauthorized nature of this weapon with anyone outside this tent. Understood? Castellano stared at him. Sir? The Marine Corps doesn't officially recognize your weapon, Corporal, but I'm not an idiot. If what you're doing saves lives, I'd be derelict in my duty to stop it for bureaucratic reasons. But if Division discovers this arrangement, I will deny all knowledge, and you will face consequences alone. Are we clear? Crystal clear, sir. Dismissed. Castellano wrote the report over 2 days, documenting everything. Range estimation using mil-dot reticles, wind reading through vegetation movement, position selection criteria, shot timing relative to enemy displacement patterns. He trained Corporals Mike Torres and James Reed in the techniques, though neither possessed Winchester rifles. Harrison quietly authorized the transfer of 2 Springfield 1903A4 sniper rifles with inertial scopes to their squad, officially designated for evaluation purposes. No formal training program emerged. No official doctrine changed. But the techniques spread through informal networks, sergeant to sergeant, corporal to corporal, across Marine units operating in the South Pacific. By October, 5 different rifle companies had Marines using counter-sniper tactics derived from Castellano's methods. Japanese sniper effectiveness continued declining throughout late 1943 and into 1944. Kill ratios that had favored Japanese snipers 3-to-1 in early 1943 reversed to favor American counter-snipers 2-to-1 by mid-1944. Lives saved through this tactical evolution numbered in the hundreds, possibly exceeding 1,000 when accounting for broader doctrinal changes that followed. Official documentation attributed these improvements to enhanced marksmanship training and improved coordination between infantry elements and supporting arms. No mention of Winchester Model 70 rifles appears in any report. No mention of unauthorized equipment or individual initiative. Castellano received no medals, no commendations, no formal recognition. Harrison assigned him to a training rotation in November 1943, where he spent 3 months teaching marksmanship fundamentals to replacement Marines. He never mentioned the Winchester. Official records list him as Instructor, Basic Rifle Qualification during this period. He returned to combat operations in February 1944, participated in the Marshall Islands Campaign, survived Saipan and Tinian, and finished the war as a sergeant in August 1945. Total combat kills, officially recorded as 12 enemy combatants across various engagements. His personal notebook, hidden in his sea bag throughout the war, listed 37 confirmed sniper kills between July 1943 and June 1945. He never showed the notebook to anyone. James Castellano returned to Brooklyn in October 1945, took a job at the Brooklyn Navy Yard as a machinist, and married a woman named Marie Scotto in 1946. They had 3 children, lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in Red Hook, and attended Mass every Sunday at Sacred Heart's Church. He kept the Winchester in a locked case in his bedroom closet and occasionally took it to a rifle range in upstate New York, but never talked about where it came from or what he'd done with it. His children knew he'd been a Marine. They knew he'd fought in the Pacific. They didn't know about the snipers, the unauthorized weapon, or the Marines whose lives he'd saved by breaking rules nobody wanted to acknowledge existed. He died in 1987 at age 64 from lung cancer, attributed to asbestos exposure at the Navy Yard. His obituary in the Brooklyn Eagle mentioned his Marine service in a single sentence. Served with distinction in the Pacific Theater, 1943-1945. No mention of innovation, no mention of the 22 kills documented in his notebook, no mention of the tactical revolution he'd quietly initiated. The Winchester Model 70 was sold at a state sale for $140 to a collector who never learned its history. But Castellano's tactical methods survived him, codified in Marine Corps counter-sniper doctrine that evolved through Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan. Modern scout sniper training emphasizes patience, position discipline, and engagement at ranges exceeding standard infantry weapons. Principles Castellano developed alone in Pacific jungles using a mail-order rifle nobody authorized him to carry. The lives he saved numbered at minimum 40-60 directly, possibly 500 plus, indirectly, through tactical evolution his methods inspired. The institution that would have court-martialed him for breaking regulations incorporated his innovations without acknowledging the source. That's how tactical innovation actually happens in war. Not through committees analyzing data in Pentagon conference rooms. Not through officers drafting new field manuals based on academic theory. Through sergeants and corporals who watch their friends die. Identify the systemic failures causing those deaths and risk everything to implement solutions the institution refuses to authorize. The cost isn't recognition or glory. The cost is living with the knowledge that you did what needed doing while the people who should have done it filed reports and followed procedures. The reward isn't medals. It's Marines who lived because someone decided regulations mattered less than results. James Castellano understood this perfectly. He never called himself a hero. never claimed credit, never demanded acknowledgement. He carried the Winchester into jungles where men died from threats nobody could counter, killed the threats, and walked away while the Marine Corps pretended it happened through official channels. 40 Marines went home to Brooklyn, Georgia, Oklahoma, and California because a Red Hook kid with a mail-order rifle decided their lives mattered more than his career. That's the only metric that counts. If you found this story compelling, please like this video. Subscribe to stay connected with these untold histories. Leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Thank you for keeping these stories alive.